I had one more question before we got to the U. You've basically brought a camera into every hood in Miami, Overtown, Perrine, Opelika. How have you gained the trust of those people to document their story and bring cameras around where most times, it's not it's not looked favorably upon?
I don't know that I have. I mean, I guess I have. Listen, trust is an ongoing thing. I mean, it's people can revoke their trust as easily as they can give it based on your conduct, your track record, your bona fides. These days you're only as good as your last tweet. But I think and I hope that in certain communities we have some credibility and our work has some credibility. So I think that I think that people know Cocaine Cowboys, they know the U, they know Broke, they know Dogfight. There's certain things that I think have become recognizable in the community that people respect, and people respect that more importantly that we will train our cameras somewhere other than the 10 blocks of Ocean Drive between 5th and 15th that everybody outside of Miami seems to think constitutes the entirety of Miami. When you're watching a football game at Joe Robbie Stadium in Miami Gardens, and they go from the field to a blimp shot overhead and then crossfade to Ocean Drive, which is 18 fucking miles away from the stadium. It is in fact probably a dozen municipalities or cities practically away, at least half a dozen. I mean, I could probably count them, like how many cities away from Miami Gardens and Carol City it is. So which is kind of disrespectful, to these communities that actually have to deal with the traffic and the bullshit of having a venue, like that in their community. And so I think that when you start to, when you start to shine a spotlight on parts of the map in Miami-Dade that don't get a lot of attention and respect, that don't get a lot of attention and respect from their own politicians, their own elected officials, and their own governments, I think people appreciate it. I think these are, I'm very proud to have, done a documentary in West Perrine. I'm very proud to have helped Evan Rosenfeld put together the Warriors of Liberty City doc series at Starz. These are communities that's real Miami. I mean, real Miami is not people, renting slingshots and crashing them into cars in South Beach. Real Miami is Liberty City and Overtown and West Grove and West Perrine, and Florida City and these pockets of underserved and in some cases entirely unserved communities.
I won't lie to you. I produce Dolphins preseason football, and I cheat some of those shots.
So AJ is to blame. Now we know.
The South Beach shots.
Now we know. Oh, AJ went offline. He's embarrassed.
AJ, we lost you.
AJ, yeah, but listen, that's the style book, man. That's how we get trained. It's just like people recognize 10 blocks of Miami-Dade County is one of the largest counties in the country. It has 34 municipalities, incorporated areas and governments and police departments and mayors beyond the county government itself. Miami-Dade goes on forever and ever and ever in like every direction. And yet all anybody pictures when they picture Miami is 10 blocks of Ocean Drive in Miami Beach.
Yeah. So what I'm asking is, when you do a doc like Dogfight, does Kimbo Slice say, hey, these are my guys, don't fuck with them? Or, how does that kind of work?
In that case, it doesn't hurt to wear a Cocaine Cowboys t-shirt. I'm not going to lie. The
street cred.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. In that case, it was Dada 5000, being in and around his backyard, which for the most part was a pretty chill, outside of the ring, was a pretty chill, spot during the backyard fights. It was like a block party, and people were there to watch the fights. They weren't there to act a fool or to mess around. There was only one scuffle that we witnessed that entire time, which is in the documentary, bullshit thing that happened at the gate. And then everybody got really tense because was somebody who got ejected going to come back with a gun or whatever? Didn't happen. Nobody really disrespected the backyard. And I had police officer friends who told me that whenever they would drive Perrine on a weekend and the streets were just chill and calm, they knew Dada was probably having an event in the backyard. Everybody came together to, smoke and bet and watch the fights, and cook. I had some of the best food of my life that I bought in the front yards of, of communities on Dada's block. And it was just a good time because I think, some of these communities get a bad rap, and I mean, these neighborhoods they're like, I call them suburban ghettos in a way, because it's like, these are just, working class people in single family homes on a nice lot what happened is that there were, Miami, people forget Miami was the South. Miami was the Jim Crow South. There was only so many neighborhoods where people of color, whether you're African American or Bahamian or Haitian, only certain neighborhoods where they could live, and build houses, and that continues to be a kind of I would say the manner in which we have segregated ourselves is an ongoing shame of this community, and of course now gentrification, pushing people of color out of those historic Black neighborhoods, is sort of the next, I guess, our next shame, if you will, that we're experiencing in real time. I know my grandfather was one of the first builders who probably built a lot of the houses in West Perrine. He came up with this. There was a burgeoning post-war. There was a burgeoning class of professional African Americans in this community: postal workers, teachers, people just working, but there was no place for them to live. And so he came up with an idea. It was a business plan, which was basically like, if you buy a lot of land, if you own a land, you have the deed, and you have pay stubs, right, from your job as a postal teacher. My grandfather went to a bank and convinced them to extend mortgages to African American professionals, and then he said it was the biggest business. He started with one model, then it became two models and three. So people came, pay stubs, they owned a lot, and they could pick which house. And my grandfather would get it. He would start off with one bank, then it was like three, then every bank wanted in on it, and helped pioneer and open up banks to start writing mortgages and financing homes to be built for Black Miamians, which was just not a thing for a while. So I have a lot of history, I guess, in this. Nobody knows that history really, but I have a lot of respect for these communities. Here's a funny story. I'm talking to Brett Romberg. Brett Romberg, great Miami Hurricane national champion. And I was on his radio show while we were promoting, me and Dada 5000 while we were promoting Dogfight. And Romberg, I think, lives in Pinecrest. And he told me this story. One day he's exiting the turnpike. He stops. I'm sorry. Let me get back. One day he's looking at his American Express bill, and he sees a charge at some Quick Mart or gas station or something in West Perrine. And he calls up he says, "Oh, somebody must have stolen my credit card." First of all, I don't even know where the hell Perrine is. I don't even know what that is. Like, someone must have stolen my credit card. He calls to dispute it. And then he realizes that on his way back to Pinecrest, he had exited the turnpike and stopped at a gas station and filled up in West Perrine, but had no idea. Like, West Perrine was like flyover country to him. He had no idea that this was a place and a community. And now they have a Wawa, which is pretty badass, because there's only a few neighborhoods in Miami-Dade that have a Wawa, so that's pretty badass now, Brian.
Hey, I live in Overtown, and I see it every day. The gentrification in Overtown, every single day I go down the street, it's changing so fast. And it's sad, because you can tell that more neighborhoods people are going to be run out of here, and it's going to come, rich, fancy townhouses are going to replace them. And before 10 years, it will never look the same.
Overtown was historically one of the most exciting, creative, and vibrant Black communities in the history of this country. It was Miami's Harlem in the best possible way, because artists could not legally. We're not legally allowed to spend the night overnight in Miami Beach. Black people had to literally get tagged and ID cards and file their fingerprints with Miami Beach Police Department. And if you were driving, a person of color were driving in Miami Beach after dark in those days, you better have an ID card saying, I'm just on my way home. I'm just, I'm leaving my job. But like, you had the greatest entertainers in the world performing at the hotels in Miami Beach, but not allowed because of Jim Crow laws to spend the night at the very hotels where they were packing in audiences every night. And so what would happen? They would go to Overtown, and Overtown had the best nightclubs with the big, so the Miami Beach people were essentially financing these entertainers to come, but then they were wound up performing at the after hours clubs and bars and restaurants in Overtown, and creating one of the most exciting and I think One Night in Miami actually is the recent film on Amazon is about that in no small part. And one of the motels where Muhammad Ali was literally forced to stay at after he fought in Miami Beach, because he was not allowed to stay in Miami Beach. He and Malcolm X and Sam Cooke, and I mean, just, extraordinary history in that community that is being destroyed. And, it's now flyover town. They built the highway and nobody's building a highway through Pinecrest or Aventura. I'll tell you that. They go to these communities and they, effectively destroy them. And what happens is the same. Listen, Harlem's a good example. You have people living in Harlem who cannot afford the homes they live in or grew up in or have owned for generations. They couldn't afford to buy them today, which means they almost are forced to sell them, to rich white people usually. And that transforms and gentrifies the neighborhood. We're seeing that in Little Haiti, I think probably pretty fast. We're seeing it in Allapattah right now pretty fast. We've already seen it in Wynwood.
I give a big shout out to the Hampton House. I just did a piece on that for recently for the Miami Heat. And so we teamed up with them. And so they're doing a great job and they're renovating it. And so hamptonhouse.org, go check it out.